Hey guys, we'll start with Module 2 now. API 653, above ground storage tank inspector, body of knowledge. In this module, you'll learn about reference documents, general tips on document navigation, important terms and definition. If you have any question, please write to us, info@qualityinspector.co.uk. Call us. You can find our number in our website or use our chat line. This is prepared by Training and Inspection Services Limited. Introduction. Okay, certified API 653 above ground storage tank inspector must have a broad knowledge in tank inspection and repair of above ground storage tanks. It's obvious. So, but in a nutshell, an API 653 tank inspector should know about above ground storage tank standard for material, design, fabrication, erection and inspection, API standard 650, tank inspection, repair, alteration and reconstruction, API standard 653, welding inspection and WPS, ASME section 9 and API 577, NDT, ASME section 5, corrosion and damage mechanism, API 571, cathodic protection 651, lining 652, and finally have sufficient general and safety knowledge. API 653 exam has two sets of reference as study materials. If we want to differentiate between mandatory and non-mandatory, or what is the legal requirement and what is the recommended practice or good engineering practice. So one set is ASME codes, section 9 welding, and section 5 non-destructive testing and API standards, API 650 construction code and 653 repair code or inspection code. The other set of reference materials are the API recommended practice 571, 75, 77, 651 and 652. Most of questions from API standard and ASME codes are in the open book part of examination and of calculation type. Some of them you need not memorize them but should know where to look for when solving the open book questions. You should have an idea how to navigate through them during open book part. When reading a code and a standard, don't immediately dive into the details. Get the bigger picture first. Understand what the code covers by reviewing the opening paragraph of each code. This is generally called the scope or introduction. Next, look at the table of contents to understand how the code is structured. It helps you have a fair idea of where to look for. List of figures and table of contents can be used as a plan B if you cannot find a particular piece of information from the content list. This step is often overlooked and the inspector fails to get the scenario, the purpose of the code or standard, and how to locate the information. We have flagged important pages of codes within each module and also brought important information in the flashcards. These information are potential exam questions. The mock exam and quizzes designed to test your knowledge, help you understand how to interpret and check if you missed something we have explained before. Those closed book exam questions that are coming straight from API and ASME codes are the ones that an inspector would be using on daily basis, and therefore you need to memorize them. API calls them practical question or awareness type of question. But don't worry, we shall supply you with enough presentation, mock question and flashcards to ensure that you would not forget them during the exam. The second set of reference documents contain the recommended practices API 571, 75, 77, 651 and 652. Again, we have summarized them, highlighted important information and explained the underlying reasons whenever necessary, so you can have a grasp of concepts. Around 40 to 45% of exam questions come from API 653. Please note that only API 650 and 653 are standards, mandatory, while the rest of API documents are recommended practices, good engineering practice. Closed book question come from API 653 standard and RPs because this information is supposed to be used by inspector on daily basis. For open book questions that need referring to tables, graphs and formulas, you shall have access to 653 reference materials. API standard 653. So these are the list of the reference materials: tank inspection, repair, alteration and reconstruction. Then you have API 650, welded tanks for a storage tank. Then there is damage mechanism subsection of it, as you can see in these brackets, API 571. Then you need to study API 577, welding inspection and metallurgy, API 575, inspection of atmospheric and low pressure storage tanks, 651 cathodic protection, 652 liming, ASME section 5, you have to study article 1, 2, 6, 7 and 23. ASME section 9, you should know, use it as for WPS PQ or WPQ. Okay, let's see how you should navigate during open book examination between these documents. Before answering an open book exam question, you need to know which document or documents you need to look at in order to find a particular topic. Therefore, you need to know what is covered in each code and recommended practice. If you are in doubt, look at the table of contents. If it does not help, look at the list of figures or tables for large volume codes. It shall give you an idea where you can find the topic. For smaller documents, peruse through table of contents or figures. Try reading the PDF format of documents on a desktop or laptop so your eyes and mindset gets used to them. It seems the brain works differently when you are looking at a hard copy of a document than when you peruse through soft copy of the same document. Reading soft copies of reference documents help acclimatize oneself while searching for a topic. A little practice is necessary to get it right. It's particularly useful for bigger codes such as ASME section 5 and 9 and API standard 650. Also, try to memorize the topics of codes and RPs so you know where to look for. If you can't find the relevant section after a couple of minutes, flag off the question and note the question number on a piece of paper given to you during the exam, and there is a high chance that you shall find it when looking for answers for other questions. Once found, you can go back to the flagged off question and solve it within seconds. You are also advised to practice looking for topics in PDF format. API standard 653 and API RP 575, 71, 77, 651 and 652 should not be a problem navigating, as they are much smaller compared to ASME code and API standard 650. There is also the content list available for each recommended practices. Please note that the reference codes and recommended practices provided during the open book part of the exam are not word searchable, hence you should know where to find each topic. In the following modules, we have provided a list of important topics and tables coupled with flashcard and mock exam for your practice. This should help you get an idea where to look for. Fortunately, the list is not exhaustive, so you should not find problem navigating through the documents. The followings are the important vocabulary for API standard API course explained in the simple language. It not only helps you understand a few basic concepts, but some of these keywords and their meaning may also be used as exam questions. Please note that the list is not exhaustive, but it intends to provide important keywords, their concepts and differences. Okay, let's see what is the order of precedence. Normally we have several mandatory requirements or standards used in every package, but there is an order of precedence in case of conflict. So if they conflict, which one takes priority. For example, although API 653 is the governing document that overrides API 650 when it is in service. Remember, when it's in service, API 653 cannot be in conflict with prevailing regulatory requirements or jurisdictional requirements or government regulation unless more stringent than them, in which case it's not actually in conflict, but it's over and above that regulation. Examination. Examination means QC activities such as NDT. It's not an inspection. The closest analogy would be the difference between a laboratory blood test examination and doctor's diagnosis. Inspection, which includes evaluation and interpretation or acceptance rejection. Examination reports shall be approved by inspector. NDT technician examines the material by one of the NDT methods and reports the result. NDT examiner can also report the acceptance or rejection of a material or equipment against an approved acceptance criteria if authorized by the inspector. In any event, it is the inspector who shall approve the examination report. Please remember that the inspector is the final authority in accepting or rejecting the QC and NDT examination report. External inspection, visual inspection from outside the tank, maximum interval 5 years. Imperfection, discontinuity, defect. Imperfection and discontinuity used interchangeably. Discontinuity is a distortion in the material if it is unacceptable. That is, the size of discontinuity is beyond the acceptable criteria, or it does not. It's not acceptable in any length or shape, such as a crack. Then it is called a defect and is therefore rejectable. Otherwise, the discontinuity is acceptable. Remember, a defect is also a discontinuity, but not the other way around. But a discontinuity may or may not be a defect. You have to compare the discontinuity against the acceptance criteria and decide whether it is acceptable, termed discontinuity, or unacceptable, known as a defect. Evaluation versus interpretation. Evaluation means finding out what type of discontinuity is it and categorizing it, such as a porosity, crack, lack of fusion, gas hole, stringer, and seam. Interpretation means comparing the discontinuity against an approved acceptance criteria in order to determine its acceptance or rejection. Obviously, you first need to evaluate the discontinuity, find out what it is, where is it, what is the size, and then interpret it, whether it's acceptable or rejectable. Accuracy versus precision, although often used interchangeably, but in science they have different meanings. Measurements that are close to a known value are said to be accurate, whereas measurements that are close to each other called precise. Accuracy is used for calibration purpose to determine how accurate the readings are with respect to a known value. Precision are variations. How close are a bunch of thickness measurement reading at a point on the tank? The point of measurements normally means a circular area with a diameter of 3 inches. Authorization and relevant key personnel. There are several key players that we shall explain their roles and responsibilities. Owner user. API does not differentiate between owner and user. The owner/user is responsible for inspection and repair to meet the code. This makes sense because if owner and user were differentiated as two separate legal entities, then none of them could be held accountable, because the owner would say that the user was supposed to comply with jurisdictional requirements, while the user would argue that the storage tank belongs to the owner and they should be held accountable. Owner/user is accountable for any shortcoming and non-compliance to codes and specification or jurisdictional requirements. API 653 requires that an owner user shall employ or subcontract an inspection organization or an inspection program and authorized inspector a repair organization, an engineer, an inspector, and an examiner. Please note that the ultimate responsibility lies with the owner user, while other individuals are accountable to the owner user. Inspector means authorized API 653 above ground storage tank inspector. The inspector is responsible to owner user for inspection and approval of the tank for continued safe operation. The inspector can be an individual working for the government jurisdiction, an insurance company, for a third party under contract with the owner user, or directly working for the owner user. Entity examiner. The entity examiner is responsible to carry entity activities as per approved procedure, and if authorized by the inspector, can also prepare the acceptance and rejection part of the report. However, please note that the inspector is the final authority in accepting or rejecting the entity reports as well as the inspection reports. Certification of the entity examiner shall be maintained by her employer and shall be available for inspectors' review. Engineer is an individual or a team who is knowledgeable in the design, review, analysis, and evaluation of storage tanks and is accepted by the owner user. Both the engineer and the inspector shall approve the re-rating, derating, and alteration. However, the repair does not normally need engineer's approval unless the inspector opts to consult with the engineer. Corrosion specialist, individual knowledgeable in material, metallurgy, damage mechanism, and corrosion monitoring techniques and is approved by the owner. Integrity operating window, IOW, pressure and temperature range that the storage tank is allowed to work, the fluid. The range is determined by the design and depends on the type of material and its thickness. Exceeding the IOW range may affect the integrity of the tank. Management of change, MOC, means any change in the process equipment or material or hardware shall be documented. It shall be determined whether such changes may affect tank integrity by increasing corrosion rate or change in damage mechanism. Relevant personnel such as the engineer, corrosion specialist, inspector, examiner, and maintenance personnel may be involved to cascade such changes to inspection planning, repair, and maintenance. Condition monitoring locations, CML, point or areas on the storage tank are identified that normally expect to have the highest corrosion rate or stress concentration. These areas are inspected and examined periodically to assess the tank condition. The locations are selected to be representative of corrosion behavior of the tank. It makes sense to select those points or area where maximum corrosion or damage is expected. The inspector selects the monitoring location based on various history of inspection. Damages occurred on similar tanks under similar operating and environmental conditions and may seek corrosion specialist opinion on expected damage mechanism for a particular tank. QA and QC, quality assurance, is the design and planning of quality control activities to ensure that the service or equipment has met certain requirements, while the quality control is the implementation of those control activities in order to demonstrate or verify that the requirements are met. Quality assurance manual. Remember that the owner user is ultimately responsible for preparing, documenting, executing, and assessing storage tank inspection repair. Owner user shall have QA system that shall include organization chart, QA/QC procedures, reports and records, inspection plan, risk-based inspection assessment, determination of inspection interval, auditing, drawing, calculation, repair, re-rating, management of changes, compliance with codes and specification, record of qualified welders, NDE technicians, and WPS, training, material traceability, and material certificates. As you can see, this is more or less a list of ISO 9000 pound requirements. Temporary brittlement, reduction in toughness when 2.5 gram 1 molybdenum low alloy steel exposed to high temperature range of 650 to 1100 Fahrenheit. Remember that embrittlement is reverse of ductility. Hardness is the resistance of material against penetration or indentation. Toughness is the resistance of the material to deform under force stress. Is quantitatively the area under the stress-strain curve. It depends both on amount of stress it can tolerate and its amount of elongation. Toughness of a material is determined by Charpy impact test.